Welcome to the Chicano Chronicles, and I'm your host, Emiliano Villa. Today we're going to talk about the Spanish invasion of Aztlan. A little bit of Chicano history, Mexican history.
"5 years ago, I promised you blood, toil, tears, and sweat. And your untiring response brought us, in the end, victory over Germany."
Winston Churchill said, "History is written by the victor." And that teaches us one thing: never trust a fat drunk. Winston Churchill set the stage for revisionist history in America. History is written by the victor, in essence, is if you go and you conquer a country or a land, you can actually tell the story of that war or of that battle. And usually it's embellished. And we know, and if you don't know, the history of revisionist history in America. So revisionist history in America tells us that it was the Native Americans that were savages, not the people coming over to try to covet their land through rape, murder. The Native Americans that were scalping people, when we all know that in Europe they were offering up to $250 for an Indian scalp, more for a child's scalp. That's the evil of that time, right? So revisionist history is funny in that it's prevalent and it prevails. So we're going to talk about the history of Aztlan today, the Spanish conquest of. And one of the things that I want you to do in your journey in this intellectual revolution is I want you to get something called The Broken Spears. That's the book that you're seeing right here. It's the Aztec account of the conquest of Aztlan, or Mexico. Edited by Miguel León Portillo. Again, it's called The Broken Spears. And that tells you the Aztec version of what happened with Cortez and Moctezuma. The Spaniards want to continually say that it was the Aztecs that were backstabbing the conquistadors. The conquistadors were the nice guys. They were there for great reasons, to help and to teach and to bring Christianity to the heathens, right? It's a fallacy. It's a lie. The Spaniards and Europeans will tell you, oh, those conquistadors, they had modern swords and modern shields and armor, body armor, and they had horses. And that's how they destroyed Aztlan. That's how those conquistadors, through warfare and brutality, went and conquered the... It's a lie. It's a fallacy. In this book, it's going to talk to you about something called El Noche Triste, the Night of Tears. And and again, Cortez wrote this in his diary. He sent back the letters. And he wrote that he sat under a tree and he cried like a little baby because he knows what warfare was. He learned. The Jaguar Knight, the Eagle Knight, they showed him what a warrior looked like without armor, without swords, without steel, without horses. And these conquistadors ran. They ran from real warriors on that night, El Noche Triste. That's the reality of the conquest of Aztlan. But let's start from the beginning. You have to understand that this wasn't a new land. It wasn't the new world. Because just like America had explored the West before they went there, and as so did the Spaniards, they knew that there was gold in Aztlan. They knew that there were resources that were plentiful in Aztlan. So they didn't happen upon Aztlan. They didn't go to the coast of Veracruz by mistake. They knew what they were going to do. And they knew how they were going to covet that land. They knew how they were going to covet those resources. So they went there with a plan. They didn't go there and, oh, we're going to be nice and then these people are going to treat us bad and then we're going to decimate them with biological warfare. Because we know that the British used blankets, right? With smallpox in the blankets, and they gave it to Native Americans. That's not what they did here. That's not the delivery system that they used for biological warfare. That's not what the Spaniards did. But let me tell you how it happened. So in 1519, Cortez and his galleon of demons sailed into the coast of Veracruz on 1519. And because of their journey, they were decimated. They were starving. A lot of them were disease-ridden. They were the dirtiest kind of human beings, so they were diseased with syphilis and these venereal diseases, right? Including smallpox. But they had already built an immunity to them because Europe has been fighting and doing things to each other for centuries before that. So warfare, they had honed their warfare already. Divide and conquer, biological warfare, poison, spying, things like that. That's one thing the Europeans don't want to tell you, is that they already honed their skills. When they got here, they weren't ignorant like the Aztec was. They weren't living in paradise. They were murdering. See, what nobody wants to tell you is that when Spain came to America, they were already 200 years into something called the Spanish Inquest. What's that? Well, the Spanish Inquest was something called that the Catholic Church did. And they were running roughshod through Europe. They just didn't do what they did to the Aztecs. Oh, they did it to the French. They did it to their own people. They did it to anybody that had gold or money. And they used heresy to take away their belongings, their possessions. So they were already mired in evil. The devil was walking Europe. And then he sailed across the sea to this pristine land where the devil didn't know of. They try to revise history and say, oh, those Aztecs were killing each other. Not true. We had battles. We were unifying our people, just like Shaka Zulu did the African nations, just like Gaius Caesar did Europe. And before him, these things always happened. So the Spanish Inquisition was already running roughshod through Europe, and they were pretty much decimating their own people. If you had gold, if you had standing, if you had possessions, land, the Catholic Church wanted that, just like they wanted the resources from Aztlan. So they used the Spanish Inquisition to go and claim that the person that had that gold was a heretic, and now we have to torture you to cleanse you. And part of that is also taking your gold. So the evil was already happening. It just spread to our country. So when the Spaniards got here, understand that they were already run roughshod over Europe. So they weren't only conquering Mexica, they had conquered the whole of Europe. So when Cortez landed at the coast of Veracruz, there were already expeditions sent to the New World. One of the Aztec tribes that Cortez ran into had a Spanish slave. And he was given back to Cortez when Cortez went to them and gave them the ultimatum of either help us or we annihilate your tribe. So the first tribe said, we'll help you. And they gave him the Spanish slave, who then at that point spoke Nahua as well as Spanish. But also, they gave him 20 other slaves. And one of those slaves was Doña Maria Malintzin, or as we know her as La Malinche. So La Malinche was given to Cortez. And Cortez recognized that she can not only speak Nahua, but she could speak Spanish from that Spanish slave that taught her how to speak Spanish. So she became his interpreter, but also his guide. So she took him to Tenochtitlan. It was us that conquered us. After that first tribe, Cortez gathered their warriors, and now the 300, however many conquistadors there were, now that number started growing because now they had Aztec warriors helping them and Malintzin. So after they pretty much stood at the coast for 6 months to eat, to get their health back, Cortez started his journey towards Tenochtitlan. On his way there, he would stop at another tribe and give them the same ultimatum. And some tribes, got with Cortez, some of them didn't. And to understand, to give you a better idea of where Tenochtitlan was at that point, imagine America, a burgeoning America. And in that country, there are actually states who didn't want to unify. Can anybody say the South? So the South didn't want to unify. They wanted to secede. Okay, learn your history, Civil War, all that stuff, right? So just like a Kentuckian or a Mississippian or an Alabamian, they don't call themselves American citizens. They say, we're from Alabama. They go by their state. Why? Because they were conquered by America. After the Civil War, America conquered the South. One of the things that I like to ask white people, and they don't know this because they've been flustered with lies and falsities, right? But I like to ask them, who was the last culture that America conquered, that America subjugated? Was it the blacks? Was it those black slaves? Was it the red Native Americans? Was it those brown Mexicans? No, the last war, the last people that we subjugated in this country were people called Southerners, Confederates. When the Confederates wanted to secede from this great union called America, the Northerners, or the United States of America, had to spank them and had to conquer them and had to take over their countries or their states. And so America took over Alabama and Mississippi and Atlanta, and you know the history, right? So if you ask Southerners today, they don't want nothing to do with America. Oh, the government, they hate the government. And well, the same thing happened in Aztlan. You have to understand that the Aztecs, you know the history, people? Chicano, come on. They started from Utah, New Mexico. They were told that we need to go south until we seen an eagle on a nopale plant with a snake in his claws. That was Mexico. So when we came down, when we migrated south, the Aztec, we found an island. And we took that island. Rocks, destitution. We asked, hey, the other tribes of Mexica, can we be part of your? Nope. Can we be? Hey, nope. We were shunned by everybody. Until 100 years later, we became a superpower. Our warriors started eating chorizo or whatever it was, but they became the warrior. And then they went to the next island and they conquered or unified that island or conquered it. Then the next one, then the next one. So we go up to 12, 1300, 1100, and now Mexico is an empire, just like the United States. But there were still disgruntled states that didn't like Mexicanos or Aztecs because they were conquered. They lost that battle. So those Aztecs made us join the Mexican empire, and now we're part of that empire, but we don't want to. Cortez knew that already. They already had known. They didn't come bravo with 300, 600, whatever conquistadors saying, oh, we're just going to conquer the. No, they knew they were going to get our own people to fight against us. They knew that we didn't have an immune system that was ready for smallpox virus or venereal disease, syphilis, and whatever. They knew these things already. It wasn't by luck or by we're so great. So onward they went. Cortez, Malinche, and all the Aztec tribes that were starting to number in the thousands. It's like what Europeans like to say about 300, right? It was 300 that fought all the Persians. No, it wasn't. That's a lie. That's revisionist history. So it wasn't conquistadors and all their horses and swords and their gunpowder. That's a lie. That's a fallacy. That's revisionist history. But let's continue. So Cortez, knowing the history and knowing the turmoil and knowing what to expect, and us not being the savages that we were portrayed as, not being the heathens that we were portrayed as, because we had a religion. So Cortez kept on his way to Tenochtitlan, gathering tribes that were disgruntled against the Aztecs. And by the time they got there, they were numbering, besides their conquistadors, upwards of 10 to 15,000 Aztec warriors from different tribes. 10 to 15,000. Not 300 to 600 conquistadors and horses. Their history is a fallacy. It's a lie. And they've utilized it for 500 years. When Cortez comes up to the gates of Tenochtitlan, and he writes this in his diary, he says he beheld the most majestic, the most pristine, advanced agricultural system in the world. At that time, Venice was supposed to be the talk of the town. Renaissance, Venice, the canals. And he said that made that look like a garden. The volume. We had an agricultural system that hasn't been duplicated today, built on different levels of a mountain. An irrigation system that watered that. Unlike the Europeans, we didn't wallow in our shit. We didn't come out like the Irish and the Scottish and just dump our bowl of poop and piss right in front of our door. That created the Black Plague that decimated 3/4 of Europe. We didn't live like that. And Cortez was taken aback. At that point, we had mapped the stars. We knew when the sun was setting. We knew how many days of the year. We knew the seasons. While Europeans walked around in ignorance, brown people were allowing the sun to tell them what time it was. We were allowing the stars to dictate our seasons and our planting and our agriculture. And that's what Cortez saw. Now at that point, Moctezuma II was emperor of Aztlan. And he came out to meet Cortez, and he was taller than Cortez. Unlike what Spaniards and Europeans and even Americans today like to depict us as short little Mexicans. We're not all 4-foot troglodytes walking around carving Mayan calendars into rocks. That's a fallacy. That's a lie. That's revisionist history. So when Moctezuma came out, what he thought at that point, because they knew the ship had landed in 1519, 6 months earlier, they sent scouts out to check it out. If Moctezuma was a savage, and all he wanted to do was kill in blood and blood religion, he could have sent his warriors out there and just decimated the Spaniards in their sleep. But that's not what he did. He thought Cortez was a god. He thought he was Quetzalcoatl. Come back to reign. And we'll get into that history. So he called him, "Oh God, we welcome you back. Come and sit in your canopy, on your throne, under your canopy," and invited him in. Now, Cuauhtemoc and the other people were saying, these are not gods. Can you smell them? Gods don't smell like that. These are dirty people. They're not gods. But he was so religiously fanatic. I mean, look at how fanatical we are about our religion. I would dare to say that Mexicans and Chicanos have funded the Vatican. The Vatican is one of the most richest countries in the world. It's not even a country. And guess who's giving them all that money? Brown people. Because the poor Mexican in Mexico, they'll give their last centavo to the church before feeding their own kids. That's how religiously fanatical we are. And that's how fanatical Moctezuma was. When they told him, let's boil these people. They're here to steal. They're not good people. He said, no, these are our gods. And let's treat them as such. And he did. So we invited him into our palace. And at that point, Pedro Alvarado, his lieutenant, and all the other captains started thinking of ways to deceive. How are we going to get the gold? How are we going to carry it out? But it was not just gold. It turned into silver. It turned into nickel. The hummingbird wings. How fantastical was that? But those were just part and parcel of the minerals, of the beauty, of the splendor that was Aztlan. So Cortez, being the animal that he was, he was going forward with a plan that King Philip and the Queen of Spain didn't agree with. So they sent another armada to go and bring back Cortez. So when Cortez heard this, he turned around and he played nice with the Aztecs, and he went to go fight his own people, the Spaniards. And he left Pedro Alvarado. He left these captains in the palace to watch these Aztecs while he went to go and fight the people that were supposed to take him back to Spain as a prisoner. Now, after he did that, he actually convinced those Spaniards to not take him back, but come and we got spoils to collect. So they came and they helped him afterwards. And so when they came back, they started coming back. At that point, Pedro Alvarado had already started the war. And so there was a night of festivities. And again, all that information, all that real history is in this book. The Broken Spears, the Aztec account of the Spanish conquest of Mexico. This is our history, not European history. You're not going to get this from Europe. You're not going to get this from America, because they're going to continue to lie and revise history. When Cortez was gone, Pedro Alvarado started the murdering spree. And at that point, because they knew Cortez had just got back, and that's why they did that. They wouldn't have done it without Cortez, but because they knew he was there, Pedro Alvarado started the killing. And you should read those stories. They're sickening, the accounts that were happening at that point. What the Spaniards did to those people. Why? Because in the palace you were not allowed to carry weapons, but the Spaniards were. So they knew what the best time, the most cowardly time to kill and murder is when people are, having fun, enjoying festivities. Unfortunately, Pedro Alvarado thought he was better than he was. And very quickly the battle turned. And the Spaniards started running. After they did all that damage, the warriors said, enough is enough. I don't care what Moctezuma says, it's time to get busy. And at that point, Cortez came, but it was too late already. The war was on. And the Aztec warriors, Jaguar, Eagle, they started dealing their death. And Cortez ran like the baby he was. And then he sat under a tree and cried like the Spaniard that he was. While most of his conquistadors drowned in the river because they couldn't detach themselves from the gold that they were trying to carry and get away with. So instead of leaving that gold, they literally tried to swim across the river with it. And most of them drowned. And that's where everybody's looking for right now, is that missing gold. To today, the missing gold of Montezuma. Cortez sat under the tree that night, cried like a baby, barely got away with his life. And what they did is the Spaniards, they went back to their ship. And they stood there for 8 months, healing their wounds and getting the smallpox virus ready. But before they did that, after they had retreated, what the Spaniards did and what the Aztecs noticed is that when they went to go clean all the bodies and pick up the bodies so they could bury them, or whatever the Aztecs did with their dead, while they were doing that, they started knowing these black husks, these carcasses of men and animals. And they're all black. The symptoms of smallpox is your skin turns black because your blood starts to dry up on your skin. So it creates you turn black. And these Aztec warriors, they went out and they started gathering them like if they were their people, because they couldn't recognize them. But very soon they started asking, who are these? They don't look normal. Well, bring them in anyways. You've got to bury them, right? That was the delivery system. Those people were infested with smallpox virus. That's how it started. Once that started happening, the Spaniards went back to their ship. They healed themselves. It took 8 months for them to come back. In those 8 months, the smallpox virus decimated the Aztec culture, decimated the warriors, decimated the families. The women were so weak they couldn't get up and cook for their kids. Kids died of starvation. The men were so dilapidated and weak that they died where they were laying. That's what smallpox does. That's how they won the war. Not by warfare, not by swords, not by armor, but by something called biological warfare, by way of something called the smallpox virus. And while the Spaniards sat there and licked their wounds, like the cowards they were and are, the Aztec culture was being decimated by something they could not even identify or see. And the smallpox virus ravished them. Some people just left. So after 8 months, what does Cortez do? They literally bring their ship from the ocean until it hit water in Aztlan. So what they did is they brought the ship right up to the front gate of Tenochtitlan and used the cannons that were along the ship broadside, and they just hammered the city, decimated it. That beautiful city that Cortez wrote about, just annihilated it. And then Hispania was created. So history is written by the victor. The funny thing is when we kicked the Spanish out, we didn't revise history. We didn't lie. When we kicked the French out, we didn't lie. Mexicans didn't make up this fallacy of conquest. Revisionist history is a European thing. It's a European American thing. And it continues today. We've talked about propaganda. That's revisionist history. And it's running roughshod today in America. So today's lesson is a lesson about who we were. And we'll talk more about it. We'll get more into detail. We'll talk about Malinche and that fallacy of her turning in her people, right? Self-hatred. If you hate your own people, you're a Malinche. We're going to talk about that. But today, we went back a little bit so that we can move forward, because that's what this is all about. We're not here to bloviate and pontificate. We're here to teach. And we're here to create something called, or reimagine something called the Chicano movement. And this plays into that, because you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you came from. This is vital in our journey of self-enfranchisement. This is vital in the unification of the Chicano culture. I want to thank you for tuning in. But I want to challenge you to study your history. Don't stop right here. Get that book, The Broken Spears. It's a short read, it's not a long read, but it's vital in our movement. Know who you were, and then get involved in what we're doing so you can be part of who we're going to become, so that you can be part of that fight. So maybe our arrogance can actually turn into pride. Because what is arrogance? Unwarranted pride. It's time to start bringing back that pride, that dignity that we used to have as emperors, as clergymen. It's time to bring back that cultura. But we can't do it while we're sleeping. It's time to wake up. Wake up, Chicano. Wake up, Chicana. And join the movement. Not for you, for your kids. Let's sacrifice where Moctezuma could not. Let's identify where Moctezuma could not. And let's act. Let's be the Jaguar Knight. Let's be the Eagle Knight. Let's walk the walk. Let's make it happen. I want to thank you for tuning into the Chicano Chronicles. I am your host, Emiliano Villa, and Viva Raza, the human race.